Throughout the history of film, there have been many great actor-director duos: De Niro and Scorsese, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Paul Thomas Anderson, Akira Kurosawa and Mifune, Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos, Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese, but perhaps none have been as exciting or as significant as Denzel Washington and Spike Lee, whose fifth collaboration together, Highest to Lowest, hits Apple TV Plus in just a couple of days. 5 is a pretty small number of collaborations compared to the other duos I mentioned. Scorsese and De Niro have made like 10 movies together. Kurosawa and Mifune made like 13 in a row. And even Stone and Lanthimos, who haven't been working together for more than 5 years, have already made 4. But the smaller filmography means that every single time Denzel and Spike team up, it feels special, and each of these films I'm going to mention are very different in genre, in style, and in the type of performance that Denzel Washington is delivering. This also led to these guys both having very illustrious and acclaimed careers outside of this collaboration, but still, whenever they come back together, it feels really exciting. And Spike is the first filmmaker I think of when I think of Denzel, and vice versa. Denzel is the first performer I think of when I think about Spike. Together, they've made some great films, some okay films, and some genuine classics. So without further ado, let's just get into these movies. Starting in 5th place, last place, is the aforementioned Highest to Lowest, their most recent collaboration that is coincidentally a remake of the 1963 Akira Kurosawa classic, High and Low, which is one of the best films to come out of the Kurosawa and Mifune collaboration that I mentioned earlier. But this is a remake in the loosest terms, and honestly, it's better when it is significantly deviating from the original, which happens a bit more in the second half. In my opinion, the entire first half of this movie is pretty weak. The dialogue is very awkward, the tone just isn't right, and as a result, the tension and the things that are supposed to make this premise exciting are not really there. A big part of the tone feeling off is the score, which is like this strange, triumphant piano music that plays pretty loudly over basically every single scene in the first 45 minutes of this film. It never matches the vibe of any scene that it's playing over. It's just a baffling, strange, and very distracting decision from Spike. But the script is also a struggle. Comparing it to the original Kurosawa film, which takes place entirely in real time and only in the protagonist's apartment, Spike chooses to stretch out this first act over the course of an entire day, and as a result, a lot of the momentum is lost. The whole point is the immediacy that Denzel has to make this difficult decision, but because it's taking so long and because he has like 30 minutes to think about it, it just loses its immediacy and is not nearly as riveting. And instead of being contained and like bottled up in this intense sort of way, the containment of the first 40 minutes to the apartment really just means that Spike doesn't get to do a lot of the really great stylistic stuff he does as a filmmaker. But luckily, after the first act, when the narrative isn't nearly as contained, the energy really starts to pick up and this movie starts to get a lot better. I love the look of the grainy 16mm subway stuff, and there's a really great motorcycle chase as well. Denzel and A$AP Rocky have a really great chemistry together, and the 2 extended scenes that are just them in a room together is like the best part of the entire movie, hands down. Thematically, the script has some very interesting and dense ideas about artistic expression and commercial success, and what obligations specifically wealthy Black artists have to those struggling to make it within the entertainment industry. And these ideas are especially interesting when you think about the position that Spike and Denzel are in the entertainment industry, in the movie industry, and the way that they've frequently had to balance their art and the business and the thematic things they want to say in their films. Even in the movies we're going to get to later, they are finding this balance. On paper, it's interesting, but honestly, the script doesn't really do a great job of exploring it, largely because I think Spike, as a filmmaker, doesn't really know what he wants this movie to be. Sometimes it's about class, sometimes it's about art, sometimes it's just a straightforward thriller, sometimes it's very faithful to the Kurosawa classic, sometimes it is completely different, and sometimes in a very notable minute or 2 long sequence, it's just like an A$AP Rocky music video, which is very strange, but kind of cool. It's just very messy. But when it is great, when it's clicking on all cylinders, it's vintage Spike and Denzel. And overall, this is a worthwhile watch just based on the last hour alone, even though it reeks of missed potential. At number 4, we have He Got Game, a 1998 sports drama that stars Denzel as the incarcerated father of a highly coveted high school basketball prospect. He's let out of jail for a week with the promise of being let out forever if he can convince his son to commit to the New York City mayor's alma mater, which seems like a far-fetched premise and a bit of an abuse of power on the mayor's part, but I was willing to suspend my disbelief because this is the first time I've seen this when I was doing this video, and I was just incredibly excited to watch this movie. The idea of Spike making a movie about basketball on paper seemed incredible because he's someone who so clearly has a passion for the sport, considering the fact that he's been courtside at every single Knicks game for like the past 20 years, even when they absolutely suck. So I was excited to see how that passion for the sport would translate to the way that he films it. And the basketball sequences are really, really great. There's a lot of frenetic, quick editing and a lot of intimate cinematography that really like thrusts you into the game in a way that I absolutely love. But this movie is mostly not about basketball. It's about the father-son dynamic. It's about a father whose past failures make him completely irredeemable in his son's eyes, and the fact that that father wants to connect to his son but also knows that their relationship is completely irreconcilable. Anytime that Denzel and his on-screen son Ray Allen are together, this movie just absolutely works. It's emotional, it's powerful, and it does a great job of showing the audience the issues with both of these characters while not forcing them to pick a side. But the issue is whenever they're apart, and there's just a lot of unnecessary subplots and general fluff to this film. The whole Denzel romance is completely inconsequential, adds absolutely nothing to the movie, and just feels like a lazy screenwriting trick to give him someone to spout exposition at. I also want to talk about Ray Allen as a performer, because as a non-actor, I think this is a pretty impressive performance, and he more than holds his own whenever he's in scenes with Denzel, but whenever he's asked to be the emotional core of a scene, I think he really falters. His moments with Rosario Dawson, or with his grandparents, or with his sister, just don't really work for me because I don't think he has the natural screen presence to hold my attention. Some of his line deliveries are a little bit awkward, and sometimes it just feels like he's not emotionally engaged enough as a performer. This film also has a score issue similar to Highest to Lowest. There's this very slow, dirgy and somber string section that plays over almost every single scene and just takes a lot of energy out of this. I'm not sure why Spike does this. He does it even in some of his best movies, but he just has very overbearing scores that are really not the way that I would use scores and not the way that I like to see scores used. So that definitely takes some points off. And overall, I feel pretty similar to this film as how I feel about Highest to Lowest. There's a great movie in here somewhere, but it's dragged down by some of the specific stylistic choices and some of the unnecessary subplots, and as a result ends up being just a pretty okay time. The bottom two on this list, Highest to Lowest and He Got Game, are entertaining but definitely flawed. But these next three films I have next to no complaints about and I think are genuinely incredible. At number 3, we have Inside Man, a 2006 heist thriller that stars Denzel as a cop in a tense game of cat and mouse with a bank robber. Inside Man is a blast and a really smart film, specifically in the way that it subverts audiences' expectations of the heist genre in a really great third act twist that I don't really want to spoil here, but is just incredible. The tension is palpable within every single scene, partly because Clive Owen is really intimidating here as the bank robber, and partly because Denzel is equally great in his role as a cop on the edge that's like slowly losing his mind. He's like desperately trying to take control of the situation, but the robbers are always 5 steps ahead of him, so he never can. And then it turns out that the thieves aren't really the bad guys, but it's more so like the corruption within the bank itself, which is a really brilliant choice, and I'm surprised no one has thought about doing within a heist film until this one. My only nitpick is some of the visuals look a little bit dated and very like 2000s. Specifically the interrogation sequences that are interspersed throughout the film that have this strange yellow tint on them that it's just kind of hard to look at. But besides that, I have basically no complaints. This is probably the most fun film on this list and is genuinely in contention for one of the best heist movies of the entire 21st century. At number 2, I have More Better Blues, probably the least known film on this list. It stars Denzel as a jazz musician who's struggling to find his artistic voice while also navigating financial issues and relationship problems. It's essentially a character study and is largely plotless, especially in comparison to the rest of the films on this list. Most of it is just like really vibey, watching Denzel and his band play music on a stage or just watching him hang out in his apartment. The atmosphere here is absolutely spectacular. A lot of textured compositions with really expressive lighting. Love the way that he uses reds and blues in this film. Also some slow, patient camera work and just some really great music. I think this is one of the most contemplative and slower films in Spike's filmography, and it's all the better for it. Probably the best example of the Spike and Denzel bromance on screen, as well as Spike plays a pretty prominent role in this film as Denzel's friend who's struggling with gambling debt. There's a scene where they just like take a bike ride together and are just laughing together, and it's pretty wholesome and sweet, especially when you think about the decades of creative collaboration and genuine friendship that these two guys share. And there's the ending, which I don't want to dive too deep into, especially if people haven't seen this film, but it's some of the best filmmaking filmmaking of Spike Lee's entire career. The combination of music and montage here is absolutely brilliant, and this film very quickly shifts from a pretty vibey and fun drama into an examination of purpose and family and what it means to really know what you want out of your life and what it takes to know that. I was blown away by this and was surprised that I hadn't heard about this until I started researching for this video. It's probably the one that I recommend the most on this list, largely because it's not as well known as the others, but also because it's one of the more laid back and fun collaborations between these two guys that both showcases Spike's incredible filmmaking and Denzel's natural charisma. So yeah, couldn't recommend this one enough, but it is not the number one pick. That would of course go to Malcolm X, which probably doesn't need any introduction, but is a 1992 biopic of Malcolm X with Denzel as Malcolm. I wrote something for every single film on this list, but I didn't write anything for Malcolm just because it was a very intimidating feat. This is a 3.5-hour epic that I think is genuinely in contention for one of the best American films ever, and certainly one of the best biopics ever. It's incredible how it encapsulates a person's entire life in just a 3-hour span. What seems like a long time, but it absolutely flies by because Spike is just so locked in as a filmmaker here. He has complete control of the pace. A bold but ultimately beneficial choice for this film is the fact that we don't really see the Malcolm that most people know until like 90 minutes into it. The first hour and a half essentially like a crime thriller, which these two people are very great at, but also just adds a lot of texture to the last 2 hours, which is an incredible tour de force on Denzel's part, delivering some incredible speeches. I'm not sure if this is my favorite Denzel performance, but it's probably objectively the best one. He simultaneously completely transforms into Malcolm X, but is also doing something that Denzel's always been really great at, not only these very fiery monologues, but also just being the center of a film. This movie is 3.5 hours long, and Denzel is almost always on screen doing something. Even in the moments where he's completely silent, he's still absolutely captivating. Also never really strays away from the more controversial aspects of Malcolm X as a figure. Unlike a lot of Spike Lee's best films, it doesn't preach to you, it doesn't force you to feel a certain way. It allows the viewer to interpret it and form their own opinion on Malcolm. This movie is really difficult to talk about because it is so epic, it is so big, and as a result, I'm not really going to try to explain a 3.5-hour movie in just like a couple minutes. So I'll just say go watch it if you like movies and if you like these two guys, because it is a remarkable achievement. And I'll leave it at that. So that's my ranking. Love Denzel and Spike. Had a really fun time rewatching some of these movies, watching some of them for the first time. I would recommend basically all of them, even Highest to Lowest, which is definitely flawed, but I think some people will like it a little bit more than me. So if it's in theaters near you, go check it out. Go watch it on Apple TV Plus or whatever. I don't know why I'm doing a sponsorship for Spike Lee, but whatever. That's basically all I have to say. In a few days, I'm going to be doing a review of Boogie Nights in preparation for my PTA ranked video that's coming out around the same time as One Battle After Another. So subscribe if you want to see that. I do movie reviews Tuesday and Friday. Like this video if you want. Tell me how you feel about Spike and Denzel and their movies together. And that's really all I have to say. So bye-bye.